Hello readers, I'm the Avid reader and today we're reviewing Pet Sematary, written by Stephen King in 1983. So this is a horror novel by Stephen King and so far it's the most disturbing I've read. It and Salem Slot, those are two scary books. This is disturbing and it has also some scares. So if you like to be uneasy, you're gonna like this book. And it's in 3 parts. So the first part starts out with the Creed family, which is headed by Lewis Creed, a doctor, moving to Ludlow, Maine. They have 2 children with them, so a young Ellie and then a toddler baby Gage. And Lewis Creed quickly befriends a man called Judd, his neighbor, across the street, and they drink beer often in the evening. And on this road they are living on, there's a lot of trucks that pass all the time, so Judd takes them along a small road behind their house to a place called Pet Sematary. And it's a cemetery of pets, and it's misspelled as this has been set up by children. And the mother Rachel, she finds this disturbing, but Ellie handles this pretty well. So the point in this book is to look how you should deal with grief and death. And the rich parents of Rachel are a bit weird. Irvin Goldman, he offered money for Lewis Creed to finish his medical studies if he stopped dating Rachel. So you can see here some family tension, some bad blood between the father-in-law and the son-in-law. And Lewis Creed has gotten a job at a university, and once he gets a patient who he knows is going to die, he's called Pascal, and his face is quite screwed up, so he has bad dreams about him regularly. During Halloween, the wife of Judd has a heart attack. During Thanksgiving, Lewis does not join his family since it's going to be at his father-in-law place. They have a cat called Church, and it's a nice friendly cat. It's not really mean to mice, it toys with them sometimes, but it never really kills them. Well, Rachel is afraid of death, so he neutered it, and the relationship between Rachel and Lewis got better, and he stopped having nightmares about Pascal. But while they leave, the cat gets run over by a truck, and he gets a call in the evening that the cat is dead from Judd. He comes out and Judd starts taking him into the woods with the cat, and they go over this deadfall thing behind the pet cemetery, and they come to a second cemetery, and this is actually where you bury things for them to get back to life. So the cat is buried, it's hard work, they are exhausted when they get back, and Church comes back to life, but he stinks. Lewis could not face to have Ellie, who loved that cat, come back to a dead cat now. So Lewis doesn't really like his cat anymore because it's kind of undead, but Ellie still loves him, although she's not comfortable with him all the time. Judd explains to Lewis that his own dog a long time ago died from some barbed wire, and he also brought him back to life through this way. He got help from an older man, and the dog always stank, but it was a friendly dog. And there have been many pets that have been brought back to life, and usually they're not violent, they're quite odd, they stink, but usually they're not really evil. There was one exception to that. His wife Norma dies. Another thing we learn is that when Rachel was a child, she had a sister called Zelda who died. Now she got sicker and sicker, she got crazy, kind of sadistic, and Rachel hated her sister, but she was traumatized from her sister dying, and the parents were not at home, they were off doing some other stuff. And that's the first part. So here you already have introduced undead pets. It gets a lot more disturbing the second part. And the second part you could describe as grief, as the baby, the 2-year-old, Gage, is run over by a truck. And we have Lewis grieving over this, and he keeps imagining him trying to catch his son who gets run over by the truck. Usually he imagines that he fails. He imagines sometimes that he succeeds and their future life. He dreams about it. And Jude and some other guy, Steve Masterson, they have to help take care of the family because he's starting to neglect his daughter and his wife. So you have the burial of Gage, and the father-in-law, Irving Goldman, and his wife come along, and Goldman refuses to shake hands with Lewis Creed. And then Goldman blames Lewis Creed on this and blames all this other stuff that Lewis Creed caused as a problem in the family, and they have a fist fight, and Rachel goes into panic mode from this. And one time Judd has Lewis over and explains to him that once a soldier who died in World War I, he was brought back to life, and he was with his father. He walked around kind of like a zombie in the streets. People were scared of it, and once Jude and some others confronted the father and son about it, and that undead soldier said some very mean things, and it got pleasure from accusing people of doing bad stuff themselves, of your wives cheating behind your back, of you being crooks and things like that. And basically Judd's warning is to Lewis, don't bring your son back, don't do it. This is a very good quote at the book here. Sometimes dead is better. Yeah, sometimes dead is better. You'll understand later on here. So you have the burial, regular burial, and the father-in-law is about to return back to where he's from. But Lewis decides to send his daughter and wife with him because he has a plan to bring back Gage, but he doesn't tell his wife about it. So he makes up a bunch of lies and he finds it easy. Although his wife can tell that there's something off. She can't really put her finger on it, but Lewis is not a good liar. Her daughter Ellie knows there's something very wrong, and at the airport she panics. She tells her father she doesn't want to go without him, but nonetheless they do. And Lewis returns home, he gets some grave digging material, then he goes to the regular cemetery, digs his son out, and goes to the second pet cemetery. He has to go over the deathfall, of course, and he makes a grave for his son, puts him there, and hopes that he comes back and returns home. And during this time you have Judd, who's trying to reach Lewis, but he can't, so he falls asleep when Lewis returns. There's something similar to The Shining here, that Rachel gets kind of some vision thing, that there's something wrong with this Pasco and everything like that. So she decides to return back to Ludlow. She leaves Ellie with her father. She has to book a bunch of plane tickets fast, but one of the planes is late, so she takes a car instead to drive to where she's supposed to go. She has a weird phone call with Judd. Her car breaks down momentarily. And part 3 is where we get to see the return of Gage. And this is a quite malicious resurrection. The Gage we get to see here is nothing like the Gage we see in the book previously. This happy child, that's gone. It's clearly an evil child we get to see. So you have Gage and Church, the cat, going over to Judd's, and I think Judd is ready with some knife, but Church jumps on him, and Gage has taken a scalpel from his father's medicine bag, and he stabs Judd with it. So Judd is killed. Rachel arrives at Judd's house, and during this time, of course, Lewis is sleeping, and she enters the home. She follows Church, who's leading her to Judd, I think, and then she meets her son, Gage, and she's happy in a crazy way to see him alive. And I think Gage hugs her, and then she says he has a surprise for her and stabs her many times, couple dozen times I think. Later on, Lewis wakes up, goes over to Judd's house, sees some weird car. Before entering the house, actually, there's Church on that truck, so he injects the syringe into the cat, and the cat dies. He enters the home, he finds Judd and Rachel dead. Then Gage tries to attack him, he fails, and Lewis manages to pin his child to the ground, and it's really screwed up how the child looks, of course, because it's been run over by a truck, and he injects the syringe into the baby and it dies, and moments before it dies you see the real child being back. Then Lewis throws a bunch of gasoline into that house and burns it down. He returns home. You have Steve Masterson and some other people are arriving to watch the fire. Masterson goes into the wood and sees at the other side of the deadfall Lewis carrying something white, so that's his wife, and Lewis asks him for help kind of, but Steve doesn't go to him. He returns back to the normal world, so Lewis buries his wife and Steve gets the hell out of the town. Lewis returns home, is questioned by the police, but nothing happens to him. And that night he's sitting playing some games and he hears his wife enter. And the book ends with her placing her hand on his shoulder and her saying, "Darling." This is the most disturbing ending I've read so far of a Stephen King book. So how would I rate Pet Sematary by Stephen King? I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. So it's a better book than Salem's Lot and 11/22/63, but it's not as good as The Shining and Misery. Though they're kind of half horrifying, The Shining and Misery, they are fun books to read, I think. This is just a disturbing book, which horrifies your soul. There is some scary stuff that happens in this book, same thing with Salem's Lot and It. The difference with this book is that you have many disturbing things. You feel quite down when reading this book. You're kind of half depressed reading this book because you get to see what grief is. You really see how people love their pets, love their children, and then they're taken away by a truck and you see them grieve. So it's not the best Stephen King book, and you really feel sad reading this book, but it's still a great book, a 9 out of 10. It's better than Salem's Lot, which has too much backstory, or 11/22/63, which is overall a great book. But this is just disturbing. Maybe there are a few pages that could have been cut out, but the overall feel of this book is melancholic, so it makes sense, the descriptions in this book, although sometimes it kind of feels long. But overall, a great book, 9 out of 10. Stephen King, you're a terrific horror writer, although you write also some other good types of books. So this was the Avid Reader's review of Pet Sematary, written by Stephen King in 1983. It got a 9 out of 10. I hope your readers enjoyed this book review, and I will see you readers next time.